Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Depressed Dior, and this is Middara on Tabletop Simulator. We're going to go ahead and see about getting through the story bits here, and then probably call it for a while. Been recording quite a bit, and we're definitely getting close to the end. Just doing some final stuff here. We did get a restore, and you can trade amongst yourselves as if you're adjacent during a restore, so I'm actually going to take these items here and give them to Nightingale. And she can also have the Bottle of Blessing. That should help out a little bit. I could have done a little bit better if I had swapped in the Augmented Monocle and used that to get, Nemesis up. The other thing is also I forgot about the Poppet for a while. And Poppet definitely helps out a lot because you can force a fail on a check. So definitely something that would have allowed me to get wilt up sooner or get an early paralysis to kind of buy myself around. The summons did pretty good though, despite the fact that, they almost did a fifth of its life. So, there's that, and they were still using only uncommon tier stuff, and most of the time they didn't have courage up. So overall, they did pretty good for what they had. But, yeah, that was the first time doing that fight. So hopefully I didn't make too many mistakes. I think I did it all correctly. But in any case, by the time you guys see this video, I'll probably be done with this playthrough. Alright, so in any case, let's go into Brother's Advice, because Shayless is in the coffin still. So 407. A brother's advice. The arson castle was arrayed as Shayless had never seen it. She stood at the head of an impressive room, bouncing in giddy excitement. She could hardly contain herself as a stupid smile spread across her face. Even Balthazar looked pleased. White streamers hung from the ceiling, woven together to form a sloping arch toward the center of the room, where the raised ceremonial platform was located. Musicians sat behind the platform, filling the hall with quiet music in preparation for the arrival of the bride. Tyrael sat beside her on the platform, wearing a sharp silver suit. Shayless looked down and saw she was wearing a bright white gown with diamonds around her neck. Anyone who mattered in Elenia was already sitting, and all watched her. The double doors on the far end of the hall swung open. Abigail led the procession, hanging on her father's arm. The orchestra hastily switched to playing the familiar bridal march. Abigail was beautiful. Shayless stared open-mouthed as she carried herself gracefully up the aisle. Shayless bit at her lip and tried to focus on composing herself for the moment she would have to read her vows. As Abigail took to the steps before her, she smiled bashfully up at Shayless, which caused her to melt a little inside. Then it all stopped. The percussion, the music, the flowing white streamers, everything. Shayless spun, trying to understand why everyone had stopped moving and gone silent. "I'm sorry, my daughter," Balthazar finally said, his voice stern and compassionless. "It never could have been you at the altar." Shayless's eyes narrowed, her smile gone. "It should have been him," she hissed. Tyrael was suddenly standing beside her, his formal suit changed to a groom's tuxedo. Shayless wasn't wearing the white dress anymore. It had been replaced by something blue and plain. The music was a dirge, and she couldn't look at the bride. She couldn't stand Abigail's traditional gown or the way her hair had been layered to frame her delicate features. Balthazar folded his arms disapprovingly. "Unity is what allows our kingdom to survive. You were meant to put an end to the divide, to unite Arson and Zhang." "You can't torture me like this." Shayless spun abruptly, nearly knocking over a chair. The orchestra stopped playing. "This isn't how it happened," Shayless screamed, mostly to herself. She shoved past the priest, knocked over the conductor, and jumped over a refreshment table before making it to the rear doors and kicking them open. Instead of leading to a private stairwell to the master's suite, the door led right onto an upper balcony of Arson Castle. Dominique stood on the other side, his back to Shayless. As he looked out over the lake, his appearance hadn't changed since the last time Shayless had seen him. He wore sturdy traveling clothes and fine armor. "Now, I know this can't be real." Her voice began to quiver even as she snapped the door closed on the wedding. "Because I'm dead?" Dominique turned to regard her. "You still wouldn't leave your brother hanging, would you?" Shayless lifted his pack off the ground and heaved it over the railing. His traveling gear and his weapons all went spinning out of the sight. The pack bounced off the stone wall of the castle before landing in the water with a splash. "There," she said. "Now you can't go." "Won't work," Dominique said, smiling wistfully and looking back over the water. You can't change the past. Not for me. Not for Abigail. Shayla stepped up beside him, following his eyes and staring out into the city of Valenia beyond. Thousands of people were there, living their lives in safety because her family had carved her civilization there. I know, but I had to try anyway. Dominique laughed, patting her on the shoulder with his characteristic strength. I knew I could count on you, little sister. I'm not your only sister anymore. Shayla leaned over the railing, not caring as the expensive bracelets went sliding off her arms and onto the water below. You have another one now. Her name's Nightingale. Yeah, Dominique replied, twice as spunky and half as bright. It was her turn to laugh. How'd you know? Because I'm dead and you're dreaming, Dominique said. Well, sort of. You're trapped inside a parasitic coffin monster. It's using your darkest thoughts to feed on your life force. Eventually, it will drain you completely, and you will die. Shayla froze, staring down at her hands, once reminded of the real world, and she remembered it clearly, the room full of treasure, the way the illusion had suddenly faded, the coffin pulling her in. But if you're... She stepped back, reaching down to her thigh. She removed a tiny dagger she'd been hiding there, concealed under the dress, holding it up defensively. If this is a dream, aren't you... Dominique interrupted her. When have I not been straight with you, Shayla? Don't you remember all those years we spent in court, listening to the people lying to each other? I swore I'd never be like that, and I'm not, even dead. But you're not real, she said. You just told me you were. Feeding on you, using your darkest memories and your greatest fears, Dominique turned on her. Shayla held out the knife, gesturing with the blade. Dominique nodded, holding his palms out flat, showing that he held nothing. I'm not going to feed on you. I'm not going to feed on you, too, just like everyone else I've ever caught. I'm going to feed on you, too, just like everyone else I've caught. It won't work, Shayla said, raising her voice in defiance. I've seen horrors, and I've beaten them. You can't do anything to me. Sorry, sis, but you're wrong, Dominique said. You remember this day? The last day you ever saw me? You were going hunting. Her hand holding the dagger started to shake a little. You weren't the only one. Yul had gone. Shino. It was just your turn. Dominique smiled sadly. You really think it was that simple? He asked. You really think King Balthazar, wielder of the Vandal Edge, would let one of his sons die in a hunting accident? Shayla's arms drooped. She wasn't aiming the knife at him anymore. Accidents happen. Overconfidence. Cut the shit, Dominique said. Tragedies happen. But you know what we call it when the same tragedy happens to the same people? A pattern. First, Lo, then me. You think that was a coincidence, too? Assassins, she responded, sounding less and less confident by the second. The Brahmanian Empire wants our portal. They've been trying to kill... Dominique climbed up onto the balcony. Whatever you say, sis. I thought we promised never to lie to each other. He stood on the railing, turning so his back was to the abyss down below. He spread his arms wide. No, she whispered, reaching out toward him with one hand. Do me a favor. If Balthazar ever invites you or Nightingale on a private trip, tell him where he can shove it. His sad smile returned. I can't keep an eye on either of you myself anymore. Take care of each other. He pushed himself off the edge. Shayla didn't want to watch, but she was somehow powerless to look away. She only stared as Dominique turned into a gruesome red smear on the side of the castle. She awoke screaming. All right. So, do we have Coffin Buddy? No. So it'll be 416, haunting words indoors. So I guess real quick to talk about, so back in the graduation ceremony, there was a whole thing about, I think it was Yul? No, not Yul. What was his name? Khufu. Talking about Khufu being sent on missions and kind of jokingly mentions that Balthazar was kind of sending him on all these missions, probably hoping he never comes back. So it's definitely quite possible that Balthazar is probably not the nicest guy. He's probably one of those sort of practical guys that's just like, will do anything for the kingdom type situations. Anyway, so there are chances he probably, if that requires, offing one of his own son, that would be kind of crazy. Anyway, Shayla felt something, let's see, make sure I did that right. Should be Haunting Woods indoors. I have to make sure it's indoors. Okay, Haunting Words indoors. Shayla felt something pulling at her, but she was powerless to resist. The first face she saw was her sister's as Nightingale heaved her out of the coffin and onto the rough stone of the cavern. She saw Dominique in her sister's features. The words of her nightmare still haunted her. She squeezed her eyes closed, trying to push his voice in his face from her mind. "You all right?" Nightingale asked from above her. "You were swallowed by the coffin," Shayla supplied as she sat up. "It was feeding on my mind, stealing my strength." Did you? Because she's a badass, Patrick muttered. Of course she'd know what was going on. Shayla's turned to see the ruined shape of the coffin lay on the ground just behind her, its wood shattered and metal warped within its wreckage. The two pixies stared blankly in death. I saw into its mind, Shayla said. At the last moment when it was dying, it was surprisingly human. "Like I said, we got a badass over here," Patrick declared. "It tries to manipulate you, and you break into its mind." Shayla rolled her eyes. "Stop sucking my dick, Patrick. I don't even know if you're serious anymore." Patrick smiled. "And now we know it didn't try to steal your body. She's the real Shayla's." He offered one meaty hand, and she took it, then rose shakily. She waved him away and furrowed her brow in thought. It knew where justice was. We have to go back to the blood trail." "That's great." Zeke folded his arms. "Just great. You mean through the Soul Butcher's Den?" "You ready to get going?" Nightingale asked, glancing at her sister. "Maybe all the horrible monsters back the way we came won't be waiting for us to come back. You know, because it'd be stupid." "Yeah, right." Shayla rolled her eyes again. "Alright, and now we can form the active group, which of course will be Shayla's. I didn't even bother unchecking her. So there you go. So with that, thanks for the help, Remy. You can take a break. This is going to be a pain. Alright, you know what? We're going to do this. Like that. There we go. Yeah, if I had Shayla's for the coffin fight, that would have been so much easier. I mean, to be honest, there's also a chance she would have gotten gobbled up. I mean, her conviction's a lot better than everyone else's, and she gets a reroll. But, as long as she didn't fail it by a lot, she could have at least not been instant killed. I mean, I was also going off the assumption that the instant kill didn't actually do damage, because it seemed to say, because it said to do 12 damage, and if it failed by 7 or more, instead of doing 12 damage, you just instantly defeat them. So that's the way I'm going to play it. I'm not going to worry too much about it either way. In any case, at the very least, we're now back. Everyone's together. No one's injured. Get our Doom Break. Got this fancy thing. Yeah, it's a bit rough because you can only buy so many rare gears. And so it's very possible that you can have, certain characters geared up and then not be able to use them. And then you're stuck with characters that are further behind. Which is kind of the situation I was in. Remy's, she's further behind on weapons, which of course made all of her summons weaker. And it just kind of added up from there. This will put her back at 24 HP. And that would be 13, 14, 15. Yep, 15 defense. Okay. And that's everything she has. Put that away. Alright. Yeah, everything's back to normal. Okay, got it. Alright, continue to now what? 421. Zeke poked his head back through the door to the Soul Butcher's den. His eyes scanned the room, but didn't see any movement. The place seemed deserted. He breathed a deep sigh of relief. "No one's home," he whispered. They crept through the empty lair, shutting the door gently behind them. "Well, that was lucky," Nightingale muttered, slumping against the wall on the other side. "Lucky?" Shayla repeated. "We're lucky following those pixies didn't get us killed earlier." "Sure, hindsight is 20/20, Zeke said. It seemed like a good idea at the time. Nightingale yanked at one of Zeke's arms and dragged him away. "Stop fighting. We should get back to the trail quickly. Justice can't wait." As they started back the way they came, Zeke still wasn't sure it had been right to turn against the coffin. 424. Blood trails. It was almost impossible to keep anything straight in the twisting nightmare of passages inside the Eyrie. Nightingale shivered, imagining being born there, trapped underground, having no idea what the surface even looked like, and surrounded by a world of things that wanted to kill her. While they had yet to run into more monsters, there was evidence that they were somewhere nearby, lurking in the dark. "You need to leave." The dreadful voice of the Maluma wormed its way into Nightingale's ears. Before she can respond, Remy's scream silenced her. Nightingale turned to see her staring wide-eyed at the Maluma, who had formed behind Nightingale. It towered above them, frothing and bubbling and glowing with ghostly light. Nightingale looked around and saw that Remy wasn't the only one staring at it. Rook had drawn his weapon. Zeke's jaw hung open, and Shayla's had gone completely pale. "You must listen," it commanded. "The Shadow Lord's lair is just ahead. My host is a blind fool and ignores the consequences of her actions. I implore you all to be wiser than she and seize this course of action." "You're one ugly son of a bitch," Shayla muttered. "Now get out of my sister." She swung her massive blade through where the Maluma floated. It passed through harmlessly, as Nightingale knew it would. "We tried that," Rook muttered. "If it were that easy, we wouldn't be down here." The Maluma continued to bob in the air, its flexible body stretching and melting into itself. "If you continue, you enter his domain. If you die, he will own you. Please do not go on. Your actions have been remarkably decisive for humans. Now act to preserve your lives and turn back." "I see how it is," Remy grinned mischievously. "Now you're nervous because your ass is on the line, too. If Nightingale dies, you'll have no body to go to. You'll be just as screwed as we are." "Screw you." Zeke marched forward, passing through the Maluma's ethereal body. Come on, guys, if it's just trying to get us to bitch out and leave Justice to die. "The Theodosian mage is dead already. You need not die with her." The Maluma screamed and let out a thick growl before vanishing. Nightingale caught up with Zeke in a few strides and walked beside him. "Hey, if this Shadow Lord is really so powerful, why would it care that we're here?" Nightingale froze, trying to place the sudden dread that felt like it would crush her. The stone above her suddenly seemed oppressive and claustrophobic. "Because it amuses me," rumbled a distant voice. Nightingale turned and saw a figure floating in the air beside her, off the path. Unlike the Maluma, its form was neither translucent nor indistinct. It was solid, tangible, and terrifying. The figure was humanoid, but the details of its anatomy were lost in the folds of its billowing robes. A constant blue glow, thousands of little sparks moving together, shone through gaps in the cloth. Its hands were wrapped in gauntlets, and it had no face, no eyes. At the height of its robes was a skull with glowing sockets gazing at them intently. "Having so many visitors in such a short time is a delightful change of routine," it said. "I had gotten used to seeing so many of the same creatures die." Nightingale felt its power and backed away. Zeke's voice shook. "We're looking for a girl. Where did you take her?" "The tribute. She is within my labyrinth," the creature answered, rising to a standing position and drifted towards Zeke. "You will not find her. In wandering, you will become lost, and then you will die. Each of your deaths will be more delicious than the last." "That won't happen." Zeke held his ground, not backing away as the Shadow Lord towered over him. "We're going to find her and bring her back." "Is that so?" The Shadow Lord reached down and extended one gauntleted hand towards Zeke's neck. "I see what happened here. It was because of her that the Aegis-stone was destroyed, wasn't it? Wonderful. After all these decades down here, this place was becoming tiresome. The destruction of the city above will be a refreshing change." Zeke looked like he was fighting the urge to run. He visibly shook, but he still stood defiantly. "Once we get justice, we'll fix the Aegis-stone and leave you here to rot. We won't ever let you escape." "Let me escape." The demon lifted a few inches from the ground, laughing again. I was never trapped. The Aegistone caught my prey and kept them close. They have bred and died as endless sustenance and entertainment. He raised his terrible hands and gestured around them. Have you ever seen a better prison? One so large it could sustain its own population. Hundreds of thousands have died here. Nightingale heard the Maluma screaming at her. It was telling her to run, to leave Zeke to die. The Shadow Lord loomed even closer to her friend, but Zeke still stood firm with one weapon shaking in his hand. I'm not leaving without her, Zeke muttered. The Shadow Lord paused for a long moment and looked at each of them. Why is she worth so much to you? Her capabilities are rare, but even a Theodosia mage is not worth all your lives. I don't expect something like you to understand what our friendship means, Zeke replied. We don't abandon each other. She would do the same for us. Oh, I have many friends, the Shadow Lord chuckled. I suspect there is something else to your tale. The abomination paused for a moment, staring at Zeke with its hollow eyes. It is a shame the Aegistone was destroyed. As my prisoners escape, this place will become less entertaining. The Shadow Lord began to fade, becoming transparent. But I will console myself with the lives of those who live in Greyhaven. Wait, damn it, Zeke shouted, charging toward it. Give us justice. You're free to spend an eternity with her, the Shadow Lord said, its voice distant. You can die here together. Then you'll be together forever. It laughed again, and the terrible sound remained for moments, even after it had completely disappeared. Nightingale could still feel its presence watching them from nearby, even though its body was gone. We can't leave justice here, Zeke said, holding his weapon high. We have to keep going. We have to free her. Nightingale nodded. It's hard to think something worse than getting killed by the Maluma, but if we die down here, Nightingale shook her head in horror, that thing will trap us forever. Not even Shayla objected. The decision was unanimous. They'd come so far, and they had to press on. Do we have reluctant partnership? Yes. Do we have massacre? No. No such thing as gods. Zephyr led the way. His footing was sure as he took each twist and turn, never slowing his pace. You seem pretty calm about this entire situation, Nightingale pointed out. You want to tell me why you aren't afraid of fighting the Shadow Lord? I've faced stronger things than this Shadow Lord, Zephyr said. You'd be surprised how many creatures proclaim themselves gods. I've faced the beings the Shadow Lord prays to. I survived their fury, and I'll survive this. They say he's a god because he can't be killed, Nightingale argued. What's scarier than something that's unkillable? Zephyr scoffed. Everything dies, Nightingale. You only need the right weapon. He was quiet after that, leaving Nightingale to wonder what kind of weapon could kill a god. Trap souls. Alright. Up ahead, you see a group of poppets heading your way. Where there are poppets, there must be gatekeepers, and sure enough, you can hear one around the corner. Sounds like there will be more enemies further in. You steel yourself for combat and head deeper into the Eyrie. Alright. Now, I'm familiar with this encounter. Lair of the Shadow Lord, so same rules as before. There's Icky, which is we don't read until told to. There's a white totem. Does it still have the bug from before? It technically does. Yeah, the book is wrong. It has 2 blue totems. But I think what it's supposed to be is supposed to be a blue loot. Yeah, so I'm going to assume the creator the creator of this module did work with the developers. So I'm going to assume this blue loot token is where it's supposed to be. Because obviously you can't tell here because it's blue loot token and blue loot token here, or blue totem, blue totem. So we'll go with that. Alright, as for that, there's nothing else to note. There's a game over state, by the way. Alright, now, something to note here is on the lose condition, it doesn't ask if you have 4 or more injured adventurers, implying that as we're going through this, if you've been getting defeated a lot, you would actually have a bunch of injured people, and you wouldn't be able to use them, and eventually you'll just run out of people. And in this case, if you have 4 or more injured adventurers, essentially, even if you had the maximum party available, you would be down to literally half your party at that point. Anyway, besides that, not really much to point out. I'll just take a look at the map real quick. We've got some poppets, gatekeeper, soul butcher. all of which is pretty easy to deal with. I think there's one, two, three. I think there's 4 encounters left. One of them's optional. So with that, we're definitely getting close to the end here. I mean, what makes it for this particular chapter? I mean, there's a decent number of encounters, but what takes up most of the space is all the pages of just dialogue and text. Some of which is stuff you'll never run into, like with the coffin stuff. Like literally, there's multiple pages for each of those characters, what they go through while they're in the coffin. And we only got to see Shayla's, which ironically was the one I actually peeked at when I was flipping through the book to make sure everything was there for the module. So I guess that works out for me. So I at least now officially know what's behind what's supposed to be for Shayla's story. It's definitely puts Balthazar in even dimmer light than he already was. In any case, I'm pretty sure we're back to rare. Yeah, we are. So rare loot. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead and call it here. It's going to be a short video just to get through all the story stuff. And obviously, we're going to get set up here in the top right, the little corner here. And go from there. So I am the Depressed Dior. This was Middara and Tabletop Simulator. I'll see you guys later.